All right, welcome back everybody to our NSX-T series where we're building out the data center. So in this video we're going to be taking a look at continuing building where we left off in vCenter. We created the data center, which is just a single click, right? Nothing significant there. What we're going to finish doing in this video is adding the clusters, adding the ESXi hosts, and stuff like that, getting them to the point where we're comfortable. Now that should only take a couple minutes, right? It's really not going to be that complicated, and we'll do some moves and stuff like that and with the ads. That's actually pretty basic. We're going to focus mostly on the networking side of it and how that's going to come into play. We'll create the distributed switch, the port groups, all that type of stuff, and we're going to work our way through doing all of that. Once the network is in place, then pretty much everything else kind of falls into place for us. We'll be able to go through and add our storage so we can have our shared storage across all of our hosts, and then we'll be able to focus on, I'll be able to show you the vCenter way of uploading an ISO image to a storage array and getting that up so we can deploy VMs through vCenter server, and then we can actually make it better because then we'd be able to go through and do clones and templates and golden images and all that type of stuff. So it makes it a lot easier to maintain your vCenter environment when you've got vCenter to deploy stuff with, to be honest with you. ESXi and VMware without vCenter sucks. Let's just be real. You can do a lot with it, but there's also a ton of stuff that you can't. So once we get through all that, that's going to take us a little bit of time. This video is going to be a little on the longer side because of all the button clicks we're going to have to go through and all the logic that I'm going to have to talk you guys through and stuff like that. And then once we're at that stage, we'll go through a Windows server deployment in a following video, and then we'll be able to talk about NSX-T, which is why all of you are here. So there's a lot of moving parts to get to where we are today, or in this particular video, but we still have more work to do. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and get out of the way, and let's go ahead and minimize this guy, and let's go ahead and begin our deployment of what we need to do. So I'm going to right click here, and you can do one of two things. You can add a host. So I'm going to add ESXi host 4, and I'm going to do this because it's going to be a single host, right? I'm going to type in dc1-ESXi 4, click next, and because I have DNS, it should be able to find it. Just like that. And there you go, it found it. If you want to validate the SHA-1 thumbprint, you can go to the DCUI of the server. Let me show you exactly what I mean by that. You can go to here. So let's pull up host 4, and this is the DCUI, right? This would be the direct console user interface. So pull up a KVM console to the server. This is what you're going to get. Okay, so you can go ahead. I'm gonna F2 real quick to send it. That's also my pause key. So I'm gonna go ahead and type in the password. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to view support information. And here on the right hand side, right where my mouse is sitting, mouse is right here in the center of the screen, 34 Delta 8 is what I've got. I'm going to minimize this. 34 Delta 8. It lines up. So we know it's the right host. That's how you would validate that. So I have had scenarios where I've had to have people like, well, I'm not sure if that's the right certificate. Well, there's a way to find out, and people have to log in. Oh, yep, that's right. Pretty confident most of the time, but other times people are not, so they want to just double check. No harm, no foul. I'm going to click yes. I'm going to continue going through this whole process. We're going to be using the eval license. Lockdown mode, we're not going to be locking down the DCUI or allowing access only through vCenter server. And then VM location is going to be sitting in DC1, and then we're good to go. So let's give that a minute to onboard itself, and then we'll be able to go from there. So once that process is in place, that'll take a couple of minutes to do. There we go. So now we have host 1 there, or I should say host 4. He's there. Nothing's going on the host, but it's still there. Now what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to say new cluster. So I'm going to call this guy here DC1 comp cluster 1. I'm going to turn on DRS and vSphere HA, and by DRS is going to allow me to move virtual machines around inside the cluster dynamically. vSphere HA is going to provide a failover capability where in the event that a host inside this cluster were to fail, all the virtual machines that may have been powered off with the host failure will be evacuated and moved to another host and powered back on in order for those VMs to become available again. It's a high availability feature. Now let me preface this by saying that this only works if you have enough capacity in your cluster to do so. So when we add our host to this cluster, what you're going to end up seeing is the cluster will be an aggregate of all the hosts that make up the cluster. So you might have some extremely large numbers that your cluster will put up because it's an aggregate of all of the CPU, RAM, hard drive, all the storage, all the capabilities that the hosts in that cluster make up. That cluster is going to represent all of the aggregate. Now, there are some cases where you would be able to distribute the load across all of your hosts, but in this case, what we're talking about, you won't be able to. So what will end up happening is if you undersize your hosts and your virtual machines are very, very large, you may not have the capacity in the event of a failure to move a VM from one host to the other and power it back on. So it's important to make sure that when you are loading it, that you're trying to make sure that in the event that you have a single host failure out of a 3-node cluster, that you have enough space to move all the VMs sitting on one host to the other 2 without taking up all the capacity of the other 2 hosts. I recommend no more than 75% total utilization when you have one host down, which gives you 25% wiggle room when you're going through and doing normal workloads. So if you have a high utilization virtual machine, you're going to have a little bit of wiggle room, so you're good to go. You don't want to go 33%, 33%, 33% across the board, because then if you move one, you're going to have a hard time balancing all of that load across your hosts, moving one host's worth of virtual machines to 2 other hosts might max you out on the other 2. So it depends on the situation at hand. So just keep those things in the back of your head when you're sizing your clusters. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. That's going to create a cluster. Now I'm going to go ahead and you're going to get this little quick start. So I'm going to add hosts to the cluster. Now when you add hosts to a cluster during this method, what's going to end up happening is you're going to join those hosts in maintenance mode, which means they won't be usable until you take them out of maintenance mode. So I'm going to go ahead and type in here dc1-esxi1 root and then the password. Same thing with here, dc1-esxi2 and the password, and then dc1-esxi3 root and then here. Okay, so what'll end up happening, assuming that I got all my configuration correct, I'm going to check the checkbox. It's going to onboard all the other hosts. I'm going to click on next. And it says hosts will enter maintenance mode before they are moved to the cluster. You might need to power off or migrate powered on and suspended virtual machines. Okay, great. Thanks for the update. Now those hosts are going to disappear into the cluster here in just a second. Now what's also happening too is as they're being added, let me go ahead and scoot this up a little bit, there's going to be a number of capabilities that are going to be happening. So the hosts are going to be added to clusters that are, to a cluster that has vSphere HA turned on. So time to synchronize across hosts in vCenter, all required hosts are in maintenance mode. So with the cluster selected, I can click on hosts. There they are, they're all in maintenance mode. So I'm going to click on here and then press the shift key to select all 3 hosts, right click, maintenance mode, exit. Yes, I want to take all 3 out. That'll remove them from maintenance mode. That'll take a moment or 2 for it to happen. But once they do, they'll come in. Now what I'm going to do once this is done, I'm going to create another cluster and I'm going to show you guys how to drag and drop a host into a cluster. It's actually a pretty easy way to do it. So I'm going to pause until that's done. Alright, so we exited maintenance mode, so I'm going to go ahead and expand that cluster, and we got a little triangle here, so I'm going to go see what the triangle is all about. It says the number of total, there we go. So remember I was telling you about this in a previous video. It says the number of vSphere HA data stores for this, HA heartbeat data stores for this host is 0, which is less than the required. But if I go to configure, and I go to storage devices, I've got 1. If I go to this guy, I've got 2. Right, and they're HA data stores. So that means that I need to add host 2 to this connection. But that's now that's a cluster specific error. If when I add host 4, I'm not going to get that issue because it's well, I will temporarily. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click here. I'm going to say new cluster. I'm going to call this one here DC DC1 comp cluster 2, but I'm not turning on DRS or vSphere HA, so I won't get that error because of the fact that I'm not doing an HA check on the host for data stores. So I'm just creating the cluster because it's a requirement, and that's the key thing right now. I need a cluster to be able to push the NSX VIBs to the host. You can't do that without a cluster. You can't have a host outside of a cluster also running NSX. It doesn't work that way. So I won't get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. I can do one of two things. I could either drag it here, and then you get the little, actually let me change the theme so you guys can see this. Switch theme back to light. I'm going to take this guy and I can move it here. You notice how the little green plus sign where I can add it to the cluster? There's that way. You can just drag and drop it. Or you can right click and say move. Move to. Expand DC1 and you can select the cluster and then click on OK. And then it moves it there. Blammo. Just that simple. Pretty straightforward stuff, right? I'm going to go ahead and switch the theme back. So there we go. Now if I wanted to move it out of the cluster, right, it won't let me. So in order for me to move a VM or a host out of a cluster, I actually had to turn it into maintenance mode. Then I can move it out of the cluster. So just so you guys are aware of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and add one more cluster. And I'm going to go ahead and new cluster. This is going to be DC1-edge cluster. I'm going to turn DRS on and HA. And then I'm going to, right here, I'm going to say add host. I'm going to do DC1-ESXi5. The root and the password. Oh, back. Did I? Oh yeah, I screwed up the name. There it goes. It's able to find it via DNS. I'm going to hit the enter key all the way down. There we go. Now he's not going to get added to the cluster. He's going to be just added to vCenter server in the data center as is. I'm going to right click here, add host, and do the same thing again. So DC1-ESXi6, the root and the password. Yes, I want to do this and just enter key all the way through the rest of it. So that'll take just a minute. So we did the move to with this guy. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select these guys together. Actually, let's see. Can I do data center level, hosting clusters? I should be able to grab these guys here and then drag them into the edge cluster. Perform this action on 2 objects? Yes. It says, so would you like to move virtual machines? Yep, that's fine. I don't have anything going on there, so I'm not worried about it. So that's going to move those devices into, click OK for both of them. So now what's going to end up happening is you're going to see both hosts get added to the cluster. Now what's interesting here, if you click on any one of the hosts and you click on summary, it's going to give you the error because what did we turn on? If you go to vSphere availability, vSphere HA is turned on. So we're going to get that, hey, you don't have the appropriate, and right now it's configuring everything for us. We're going to get that warning, hey, you don't have those data store heartbeats set up. So, fix your stuff. So that's basically what we all needed. I'm going to pause until that's done. Alright, so what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to begin the process of the networking build portion of things, because we need the network to do what it is that is the networking, the storage, all that type of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this guy down just a little bit. We don't need him all the way up there. Okay, so there's a couple things that we need to go do. The first thing is on DC1, we need to right click here and create a new distributed switch. So I'm actually going to make two of them. One for the compute, one for the edge. So I'm going to type in DC1 comp VDS. The version that I'm going to be deploying is going to be 6.6 for 6.7 and later. I'm going to go ahead and give it 6 uplinks because I'm going to be deploying on all the compute nodes. They have 8 network adapters, 6 of which are going to be tied to the VDS, 2 of which are going to be tied to the NVDS when we get down to it. I'm not going to create the default port group. Next, and finish. So there's that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click and say new VDS. This one here is going to be DC1-Edge VDS. Select the version is going to be 6.6, and then I'm going to go ahead and give him all 6 adapters are going to be used for this guy. I'm going to uncheck the default port group and then finish. Alright, so now that I've got my VDSs created, I can go ahead and go to the next stage, which is clicking on the networking tab. Let me go ahead and expand this out. We're going to have 2 VDSs. So what I'm going to go do is on the compute VDS, I'm going to go ahead and configure this guy. So from a topology perspective, we don't have a whole lot going on, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize this so we have more area to work with. I'm going to go ahead and actions, distributed port group, new DPG. I'm going to put in DC1 comp management. And I'm going to go ahead VLAN 0 because it's VLAN 1 and finish. Now one thing, if you highlight this, it'll show you how many network adapters it's mapped to. So similar to what we did on the vSphere standard switch, we're going to be doing here. I'm going to go ahead and create several more. I'm going to go ahead and create DC1-comp dash, and this is going to be SAN 1. This is going to be VLAN, and it's going to be VLAN 12. Next, and finish. Actions, new DPG. This one's going to be DC1-comp-SAN 2. Next. This will be VLAN 12 as well. You need a dedicated port group, and we're going to tie each one of these port groups to a VM kernel adapter that we'll be using for multi-pathing for our storage. Next one up is going to be our vMotion. So we're going to type in DC1-comp-vMotion. Next, we're going to go ahead. This one here is going to be VLAN, and it's going to be VLAN 20. Next, and finish. And then we're going to do actions again, new DPG. We're going to come in here in DC1, and this one here is going to be for our endpoints. So this is going to be for data. So this is going to be comp, and we're going to type in Linux. Next, the VLAN here is going to be 100. Next, and finish. And then one more, new DPG, so DC1-comp dash, and this will be Windows. Next, VLAN ID will be 101, just like that. Next, and finish. Okay, so I have all of my distributed port groups built and attached to my VDS. This will, all these will get mapped to all the ESXi hosts once I go to roll them out. The next one I'm going to go do is on here. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of VDS port groups in this guy. I'm going to go ahead and new DPG. I'm going to type in DC1 edge dash management. Next, next, and then finish. Actions, new DPG, DC1-edge-SAN1. VLAN here will be 12. Next. Actions, new DPG, DC1-edge-SAN2. Next. VLAN 12. There you go. You could technically use different VLANs if you have different storage connectivity, but for this example, that's what we're going to be using. We're going to go ahead and DC1-edge, and we're going to say uplinks. This is going to be how we connect the inside of the network to the outside of the network on the edge devices. This is going to be a trunk 4094. There we go. Next, and then finish. That's all we need to have here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do, actually, I'm going to create one more for vMotion. I'm going to enable it, even though it's not technically part of the deployment. I'm not going to, I can tie this to the, actually, you know what? I don't need one for vMotion. I'll show you how you can, when you are configuring the VM kernel adapter, how you can enable vMotion on the VM kernel adapter. So I'm going to go back over to the compute VDS, because that's where we're focusing our time and effort right now. First thing we have to do is marry our port groups to the appropriate uplink. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this guy out. So I'm going to go right click here. I'm going to go to edit settings. And I'm going to come down here to teaming and failover. I'm going to grab all these links and I'm going to drop them down. Then I'm going to refresh this. Compute is going to get put right there. So then I'm going to go grab SAN1, do the same thing. Edit settings, teaming and failover. I'm going to grab these guys, move them all the way down. 4 through 6, all the way down. Then refresh this. SAN1 will get pinned to uplink 3. SAN2 will be pinned to uplink 4. Edit settings, teaming and failover. And then 5 through 6 down here. Excellent. And then we've got vMotion. SAN2 will be tied to 4. vMotion, we're going to tie that to 5. So vMotion, edit settings, teaming and failover. And then 6, like that. We're going to go ahead and refresh. There we go. Now it's tied. Now, Linux, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing to him. We're going to tie him to uplink 6. Edit settings, teaming and failover. Just like that. And Windows. Edit settings, teaming and failover. There we go, just like that. So if we go back over here to configure, VDS topology, and we click on Linux, he'll be tied to 6, he'll be tied to 6. Okay, so we've done all of our port groups to uplink mappings, which is it's an important step. I'm not going to worry about the edge right now. Now what I get to go do is go to Actions, Add and Manage Hosts. Add hosts, I'm going to grab 1 through 4. Like that. Click OK. Next. We're going to, now we have to move VM NICs around. Okay. So what that means is I'm going to have to go, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at, this is uplink 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's basically how we're going to associate these. And that's across the board, we're going to do this. So as you can see, this would be a brownfield migration. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to assign uplink 1. Actually, let me click this guy here. Let me unassign the adapter real quick. Uplink, and then we're going to go ahead and map this to all the other switches as well. Uplink VMNIC 1, uplink 2, apply to the other guys. SAN switch, uplink 3, then uplink 4, and then VM, this guy right here, uplink, that'll be uplink 5, and then VMNIC 5, uplink 6, just like that. So now they're all mapped accordingly to where they need to be. Okay, so we have 6 and 7 on all switches are all mapped will be reserved for NSX-T once we get there. I'm going to click next. VM kernel ports, we have a bunch of them. So I'm going to go ahead and take this guy, I'm going to assign port group. That was management, I'm going to do this for all of them. VMK1, I'm going to go ahead and assign port group to SAN1. Just do that, and then VMK2, this will be SAN2. The same thing across the board. Okay, that's everything else. Going to go ahead and click next. Now this guy right here, we're going to expand him out. We're going to take this adapter, we're going to assign port group to be Linux. Click OK. Next and finish. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the up arrow, and that's going to be reconfiguring. So this should go from 0 to 4 here momentarily, which it does. Which, if I go over to any one of these hosts, and I look at an ESXi1, I go to configure, and then I go to virtual switches, I should now see the VDS. I should see those switches show up. vSwitch 0 has no physical adapters to apply to it. The standard switch has nothing applied to it, and the data standard switch has nothing applied to it. Everything should be attached to this guy, which is what we want to have happen. Reconfigure virtual machine. So why did that guy give me a hard time? So this guy here, we'll go to the settings. We're going to go to actions. We're going to go to edit settings. And then every once in a while this does happen. We're going to come in here, browse. We're just going to go ahead and choose comp Linux, click OK. Uncheck the data store ISO file, click OK. There, and now it's been updated. Every once in a while things get hung up and you have to manually manipulate stuff. Not that big of a deal. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have to go do is we're going to go ahead, at this point in time, we have done the networking component. Okay, so what I'm going to go do at the end of this video, we've done quite a bit already. We've added our hosts, we did the networking. The next stage I'm going to go do is I'm going to go and do the storage, or I'm going to go through, I'm going to walk you guys through the storage piece of how that comes into play and how all that type of stuff works, because that would be another 10 or 15 minutes worth of work at least. And then I can show you some other stuff because it'll be a shorter video. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll catch all of you guys in the next video.